Hello and welcome to Interfaith Insights Spotlight on Faith. And today I have a very special guest, Imam Razawi, Director General of the Scottish Al Society. And as always in this programme, we're really learning from religious leaders and how do they cope with the challenges to their faith during COVID-19. Is faith a source of strength for us during these difficult times? So as always, I'll be asking these big challenging questions. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's lovely to be here.
It's really great to have you. The first question that we're going to ask is always it's one of these big eternal questions: is how do we keep our faith during COVID-19, during these kind of situations? We have a pandemic where so many thousands of people are dying around us, and many of them are from BME communities. So how do you maintain your faith?
I think that's a very good question, and I've also been asked the question that have you seen people's faith drop or waver in this crisis? And my reply is no, I haven't. I've actually seen people's faiths strengthen. And I guess it comes down to the fact that we live in the physical world and we have free will, and this world has its challenges. Now, as opposed to a war or human atrocities that we've created, yes, we're going through a pandemic. But if we were to follow the rules and regulations, we'd find that very simply we can come out of this pandemic. And you've seen it in New Zealand, whereby a country properly observed the principles of lockdown. And within the space of a month, they opened up again. And I know for a fact that Scotland's doing a wonderful job. When I look at England, on the other hand, it's a different story. And because we're so interconnected, if somebody does drive north of the border, it does become an issue for us. But having looked at some of the numbers which are coming out, some of the cases which are coming out, I think, we're doing quite well. And if allowed to autonomously evolve, I think we could do very well as well. So I don't see a problem with faith. I think that crisis has always been there. The biggest pandemic, or where we start off with the biggest pandemic, is in the time of Moses. Certain plagues came along. So I think religious communities over the last 5,000 odd years have seen pandemics come and go. I think the unprecedented nature of this one is not the fact that it's a pandemic, but it's global. And so with anything which is global, us as a humanity have to come together to be able to counter it. So I don't see a problem. I don't think that it's just been testing to one's faith. I think it's very simple. Nature has bitten back. You've seen some of the environmental advantages of us being in lockdown. And it's very simple. You sit at home, you observe the rules, everything opens up. We have a better climate, we've got a better community, cohesion going on, because what's happened, it's very much, I guess, I'd say ironically, we've all come together. We've resolved a lot of differences. Communities who are thinking how we're going to survive, they've got huge online audiences. And so I think the hand of God has played in such a way that there's multiple lessons to be learned. And as we do come out of this, I think that we could potentially actually be better than we started off.
But you don't see a contradiction or a challenge with this theologically, with the idea of God, Allah being all loving and all merciful. That an all merciful God would not allow so many innocent people to die.
So I think the question here is twofold. Firstly, the question of evil. Evil is relative. Evil isn't something tangible in front of you. A snake is an evil, a knife is an evil, a person is an evil. So it comes down to your perception of what evil is. It's like saying somebody's taller than someone else. That's a relative statement or relative decision to be made. So evil doesn't have a physical property, but the emotions, its effect does have on the human being. We remove human beings from the world, there is no evil. Animals don't perceive evil in the way that we do. Bring human beings on in this world, that's when evil then becomes an issue, which is relative, which is to your mind. There's nothing physical. A knife is an evil. To cut is an evil. The intention behind it is evil. So it comes down to human beings. Now, when you say God is merciful, of course God is merciful, but God has also given each one of us free will. It would be not merciful for God not to give us free will. If we were robots, that's not merciful. So we as human beings have free will. And of course, we live in the confines of the physical world, which means by nature, anything which is confined has its limitations. When you're limited to something, naturally you feel oppressed, and naturally then this concept of evil then begins. So is death actually evil? Well, we've all got to die. If everybody stayed alive forever, again, we would say that's evil, because we'd exhaust all of the resources, it'd be overpopulated, and people would want to die after that, illness and so forth. So I think we're in a catch-22 position. But I would say, no, I don't see any kind of contradiction there. I don't see it as something which is evil. I think the mercy of God is there, and God works in mysterious ways. Within the limitation of the physical world, I think something that did seem quite a mountain at the beginning, oh my God, people are dying. Okay, people are dying, and it does happen. People do die, and you're going to die on Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday. There's only 7 days in a week. On one of these days, we're all going to die eventually. So death is something which is a reality. We don't all live forever. And I guess there will be trial and tribulation which come. How does God allow it? Well, it's free will. It's the physical world. And I remember a story that took place. I was in New York, and I asked a cab driver over the taxi driver. I said to him, how do you feel? He said, I've had a really bad day. So I said, do you believe in God? He says, of course I don't believe in God. If God existed, I wouldn't have a bad day. A couple of weeks later, I happened to be in Cairo. The same question. Taxi driver, cab driver at the time. How's your day? It was horrendous. Do you believe in God? Of course I do. Why do you believe in God then? And he gave a very profound answer. And it was quite a theological answer. And he said, we all know in Egypt as taxi drivers that the further away you get from God, human beings suffer, because you're moving away from the source of goodness. But the closer you get to God, the less you suffer, because you're connected to that goodness. So we said, well, Adam is pushed away from heaven because of Satan. And then we in our lives move away from God. If only we come closer to God, you start to see goodness. And all this kind of periphery things that are clouding our judgment seem to seep away. And that's the way I see things. So okay, yes, people are dying. People from our community have died. People close to us have died. Death is painful, but the question is death evil? So there's two things there. Death is painful, but is death evil? If a person, let's say, suffering immensely, and they want to die, this is where the moral question comes in. Is it evil for them to die? Or, at the same time, is it evil for them to live in that kind of pain? So I think there's multiple questions which can be raised from that just one question.
Yes.
But I would say, theologically speaking, in my opinion, I don't think that this era of COVID-19, I'd say COVID-19 in itself is evil. And the reason being is that it's an act of nature. And nature has a tendency to bite back. I would say, had Wuhan, let's say, been closed, which it was for the rest of China, but flights were obviously coming in and out, perhaps there wouldn't have been an issue. Perhaps if we would have quarantined, perhaps if we would have isolated, perhaps if we would have mitigated earlier on, there wouldn't be an issue. Otherwise, diseases are something that all of us catch from time to time. And, what can you say? Is it evil? Well, I think human actions can be evil. The act itself is neutral.
Very interesting. And that kind of connects to what you're saying about even lockdown and the world healing itself. It's because, in a sense, humankind has not been polluting. And a lot of, everything is interconnected. And we could probably argue that COVID-19 in some ways is connected to humans and how we've interfered with nature and how this then comes back in a cycle. So if anything, it's down to our free will and how we've used our actions, yes.
Yeah.
So, very interesting. We could go on and explore and unpack the whole notion of evil for many hours and talk about just how much evil is enough, but and what is the limit of free will. But I think we understand where you're coming from. And kind of related to that is a question around mosques, and I know churches have been and other places of worship that in some parts of the world have said, well, we're going to stay open because God is on our side, God will protect us, Allah will save us. What do you explain to people? Has that happened much within different Shia schools?
No, actually, I think in the whole of the United Kingdom, our entire communities follow their guidance. So our guidance has been to close, and they've closed. Separately, as England and Scotland now open up partially for private prayer, we've still given the recommendation to remain closed. And in fact, that's not just a Shia thing. When on the 22nd of June, I believe, when the First Minister did come out, I prepared a document which a guest of yours, Imam Hassan Rabbani, also signed. So that's a Shia Sunni link. And then we said that we'll observe caution as we go forward, because the idea of private or personal prayer is a very Christian idea. We obviously pray in congregation, and we're very happy for our Christian brothers and sisters to start praying again. Again, how much pressure there was from the UK government for then the Scottish government to open up, it's always debatable. However, I think we will not be opening up until we go into phase 3. So in honesty, we haven't really seen a kickback. And I think the community is very much open. And I think it's open to the fact that there is a lot of Islamophobia. Because of that, I think we understand that if we even open up slightly, even where we're allowed to open up, it could lead to an acceleration in Islamophobia that we've actually seen. And you've seen the far right attack Muslims to say, oh, it's because of Muslim congregations that there's a spread of coronavirus because Muslims are not observing. Actually, I can say that every single mosque in the country has observed, and there's not been any congregation. If there's been a hidden congregation that I don't know about, maybe I don't know about that. But I'm in touch with every single body in the United Kingdom, be it in Wales, Northern Ireland, Scotland, England, and in fact, even in Ireland itself, as a Republic of Ireland. And there has been no mosque officially open, other than for burials. And even then, it's only been those people who are allowed to go and wash a body. And the same with the Jewish community, that they have a particular ceremony. We have a particular ceremony as well. And so it's been limited to just that.
So unfortunately, I think far-right groups are trying to use this moment for their own propaganda, divide communities. I think the Muslim community are one group. I think other groups are being targeted as well, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's where we have to stick together. I think it's an important responsibility for us to stick together. And yes, the far right will attack. And I guess the anxiety with the Muslim community is that we feel threatened. And so therefore, what we're legally allowed to do, we're not doing, just to safeguard our community. And I think that's quite a sad state of affairs.
That's very sad.
We have to do that.
And connected to that, obviously, the big festival Eid al-Adha will come at the end, marking the end of Ramadan. How will people celebrate it this year? What advice are you doing? Are people able to make some connections from Zoom? Are you giving advice how you're going to do it this year?
Yeah, I think, well, of course. I think just in the same way that the last Eid was. I think in Scotland we observed all the rules. I think in England some of the rules were bent in places like Leicester and Bradford.
Right.
But in Scotland we've been observing the rules. And once we're allowed small congregations, I guess, of 6 people, families, or more than 2 families meeting, and then we'll find out in the next couple of days what the 2-meter rule is, how that's going to affect. I have a feeling it's not going to be that much of an issue. You're looking at 1 month down the line, at least 5 weeks down the line before Eid comes. So I think by that stage, 2 families or more will be able to gather within the distances that's allowed. Or if not, maybe families are going to meet in the park. So again, Eid is a time for families to come together, for communities. I don't see there's an issue. And just as we've been following the rules in Scotland, I think that's going to continue. Can I say that for England? I don't think so. But at least in Scotland, I definitely know that our communities, especially within Edinburgh, are quite observant. They've been observant. They haven't left their houses, especially those people who have elderly people living with them who are vulnerable. I think people are generally, quite observant of that. And that's really what the ruling will be. Islam is a religion that believes that you have to follow the rules, especially the rules of the country. And we're going to continue to give that guidance and follow those rules.
And how do you preserve your own kind of mental health during this time? I mean, you've obviously talked quite a lot about having that close connection to God, and perhaps that's partly gives you strength. How do you cope amongst this? I mean, obviously, you're someone who's very used to doing a lot of traveling, a lot of speaking, connecting with people, and now all of a sudden you've been trapped, probably in the confine of your own home. Are you finding this a struggle in some ways, or?
Do you know what? It's quite interesting. It's after 8 years that I've been confined for 3 months in one location. So, it's fascinating for me. And initially I thought, it's going to be quite difficult. And I guess you get Zoom fatigue as well.
Oh
And,
yeah.
and there are days you want to go out, right? You want to go for a drive, you want to go for a
Mm.
walk.
Mm.
But initially it was quite difficult. But you know what? We've had some good support, and it gives me time to pray. The power of prayer, the power of meditation is important. But believe it or not, some of the religious leaders across the world have actually reached out privately to say, if you need anything, give us a call.
Oh,
And that's been really powerful.
that's great.
I think just a couple of weeks back, I was speaking to the office of the Cardinal Vincent in London, and they reached out and they said, look, if you require, just give us a call. We're here because we understand you're alone. Whereas, other people maybe are isolating with 4, 5, 7 members. I just so happened it worked out that I was by myself. And so I've been by myself since. So for me, yeah, by myself has been quite difficult. But of course now we're, allowed to walk and, meet people at a distance, or, you meet your parents at, 2-meter distance. So it's been quite decent, So I think having faith in God is quite important. And where I thought initially that it was going to be a bit of a problem, I'm more worried about the millennials who, suicide rates have gone up, or people who are finding it very difficult. And the one thing that we're trying to lobby, and I know that the Scottish government has been quite helpful, and they will be quite helpful going forward, is some kind of mechanisms in place for those people who are facing mental health issues. And again, I think in the BBC they were saying 50% of the country are having issues with sleeping and other types of mental problems. So I think it is a big challenge, and I think the only way we can come through it is together. So I'm quite confident that if our communities can work together, give support to one another, that's really quite big.
I was wondering, there must be a bit of pressure on you from people who are feeling mental health problems, or they really are struggling, or they have loved ones who are perhaps in hospital that they can't actually communicate with or see. How are you coping with that? What mechanisms do the communities have? You've had to find a way to adapt to that.
Yeah, so I think for me personally, I wouldn't be able to cope with everything. When the first wave of death started coming in, especially from people that I know, it was very, very painful. The first GP, I think, in the United Kingdom who died happened to be from our community. I knew him quite well. I'd been to his house, it was in Essex. So because our community is quite a cross-border, trans-border, the communities are interconnected. So when one by one the deaths start coming in, then it does take a toll on you. And to be honest, I said from the outset, it's difficult for me to counsel anyone. And for that purpose, then we've got mechanisms in place. We've had to bring in counselors, we've had to bring in psychiatrists, we've had to bring members of the community who are good at this. I don't think a burden can go on an imam or a priest or whatever it may be, or a rabbi, because it's quite painful, especially when you have to oversee death and people dying physically in front of you, and then after that you've got all the burial rites. That's very painful to see. I think the only person actually I've connected with on this, his wife passed away, and I did say, if you want to talk, or if you want to go for a walk, it's not too far from me, we'll go for a walk, we'll mourn together. And he took that on board because he's the elder of the family, and obviously said, I can't cry in front of my children. So when situations come, you've just got to pick your battles, I guess. People who you think that whose case you can deal with, deal with those cases. But if I was to say, yeah, I can deal with everyone, and that's not the case. I myself end up just breaking down in a situation like that. So we need infrastructure, we need mechanisms in place. And I think those mechanisms are working at this moment in time.
That's great to know that they're in place. It's interesting, I had another conversation with an imam the other day, who was actually, when I was asking him about the challenges of how to conduct funerals and connect with people and perform rites over Zoom, he was saying that actually in some ways the positivity of it has been being able to see people face to face on Zoom, and actually being able to communicate in some ways more with people, and they've been able to have that stronger connection. So that was quite interesting to know that actually people have been able to find comfort in another way that perhaps wasn't there before.
It works. The one thing you can't do is go to sleep on Zoom. In meetings physically, people could sit there and just pass the time, but over here you've got to be focused, and it's very difficult just to stop your video as well in some of these meetings. You have to make a cup of tea.